So lesson 8, part 2. So in our first part, we've built our shop by category page. We've embedded a little form here, styled it appropriately. We've added appropriate validation, and we've enabled our book details. So we're going to go to the book details view, and let's make some changes here as well. And then our next step will be to write our add to cart functionality. So if we go to book details, I'm going to make a few changes here. First of all, the title, both in our browser tab as well as on our page, it just says details. We'll maybe get this to say book details. We can get rid of the H4 tag that says book. We're going to scroll down to the bottom. We're going to make a couple changes here. First of all, we're going to just get rid of the edit link. The second thing we're going to do is we're going to change this. Instead of this link going to index, we're going to use a little JavaScript, little trick here. We're going to set the href property equal to JavaScript :history.go -1. What this will do is it'll make that link just go back. It's like clicking back button in your browser. Whatever the previous page was, so if the user's an administrator and they've come from the book index, they'll go back to the book index. If they're a shopper on the public page, then they'll go back to the previous page. So we'll just change the text of the link to just say back. So now it can serve as a dual purpose for administrators or shoppers, and what page it goes to, rather than hard coding the URL, it's going to use JavaScript to just load the previous page, whatever that happened to be. Old JavaScript trick. So now we click back, just calls the previous page with the filter and everything. The other thing we'll do is we'll maybe move the image down to the bottom and we'll render it in an image tag. And then we're also going to want to include our add to cart form as well. So I'm going to move this. Actually, you know what? I'm just going to cut and delete this section here, the DT and DD around the image. Just going to delete it. And we'll write our own code for the image display. I'm just going to delete that. And I'll come down here to the bottom after our category name. We'll do DD for data definition. And we can just add our if statement here. So if our image is not null, then we'll just show it. I'm not going to use the thumbnail class. We can show the image at full scale on the product details page. I'm not going to bother with the placeholder image here. If there's an image, we'll show it. Otherwise, we just won't show anything. So for Animal Farm, I need to save my changes. So there's nothing here. We'll just show the full scale image. Then I'm going to want to copy our add to cart form from here. And we'll need to make one or two little changes to it. So I'm going to go back to our shop by category. I'll just close up my form. A little bit easier to select the whole thing when it's contracted. If I highlight it and copy it, I can then go back to the book details and paste it in here. I'll maybe offset this one by 2 columns so my form lines up. The only other thing I need to change is this item variable. It doesn't exist on this page. I've got to change that to the model variable here in our hidden input. We'll see what this looks like. I may need to adjust it a little bit. So I've just pasted the form right in here, offset it 2 columns in Bootstrap's 12-column grid system. And I've updated the item variable here to say model. We'll give it a try. Maybe I don't need to offset it. I'll take out that class. I think I can put this back over here. So now we've got our little add to cart button. Maybe I don't even need that offset. Yeah, that's better. Or I could go back. So our next step is going to be to write this add to cart method. The click goes here, but nothing happens. Because that method doesn't exist. So this is going to be a hidden method. It will add the item to the user shopping cart, but then it's going to redirect. There isn't going to be an add to cart page. We're going to redirect the user after to a page called cart that displays the current contents of their shopping cart. So we're going to need, in our controller, an add to cart method. And it's going to be post shop add to cart. So this isn't a get method. This method will receive the post from our little add to cart form. It might be on our shop by category page. It might be on our book details page. We don't really care which of the 2 places the user clicks add to cart. So I can add to cart from here, or I could add this book to cart from here. It doesn't matter. Both of them are going to invoke that same add to cart method. So we're going to use HTTP post. Oops. Our method's going to be called add to cart. And our method takes the 2 parameters we talked about previously. We need to know the book ID, and we need to know the quantity. So we'll define each of those as an input parameter in our method. Whoops. We're also going to want our web server to validate any cross-server scripting attacks, make sure that any post requests made to add to cart are coming from our site. They're not coming from any external domain. where someone might be trying to hijack our process. Now, in order for this method to work, I asked before the break, what are the two values we need? And we identified we need to know what book they want and how many. But Megan also pointed out we're going to need a session ID, because knowing the product and the quantity, those are two important variables we need, but we also need some way of identifying the user's session. So if multiple people, we hope we have many people shopping concurrently. We don't have one big shopping cart. Every user needs to have their own shopping cart. So we're going to have to enable session support for this. Now, by default, to conserve server resources and overhead, session support is not enabled in .NET Core by default. We actually will need to turn it on. So when our app starts up, we worked last week in our startup file. We're going to need to go here again. So let's open up the startup file. And we're going to need to add a couple lines here to enable session support. I also should complete the lab, and I'll have to add Facebook auth into mine as well. So in the configure services method, we're going to add it at the bottom. Enable session support, mostly for cart usage. So in our services, we're going to call add session. In the configure method, we're also going to need to call use session. So add session to the services in configure services, and enable session support with app.useSession. So without these two lines, anything we try to do with the session is not going to work. Either we'll get errors when we try to reference the session, or it'll just get ignored. Okay, so we're calling app.useSession inside of configure, and services.addSession inside of configure services. So we're going to look at a few of our models here. We've got a cart item model. This is the primary model we need to work with. Okay. When a user adds to cart, we are going to create a new cart item object. It's going to have a primary key, so we don't have to worry about that. Database will take care of that. We've already got the book ID and quantity. These are our two input parameters. We're going to need to use the book ID to get the price. The date added, well, that we can just get the current date and timestamp. The other issue is the customer ID. So this is where we're going to need to use a session variable. So how do we distinguish between different users that are creating items in the cart? And we've got a couple of options, because we've got two different scenarios. Scenario number one, someone is shopping anonymously. This is probably the most common scenario. So someone's putting items in their cart. We need to group those items together in that user session, but we may not actually know who that person is yet. Maybe they don't have an account, or maybe they do, but they haven't logged in. The other scenario is where our customer is already logged into the account. That scenario is a little bit easier, because we already know who they are, so it will be easy for us to attach the items to that user. So we'll kind of do this in phases. we want to save items to the database. And at first, we'll maybe just hard code in a customer ID. And then later on, we'll use the session variable. Once we can save items to the database and we're sure they're there, then we can enable session support and also add the logic, is our user anonymous or are they logged into the site? So I'm going to save those changes to startup. And then I want to go back to my shop controller and start writing the code for add to cart. So first, we want to get book price. So we use context.books.find on the book ID. So then we can get the price from the resulting object of our query. Customer ID. I'm just going to put it in, I'm going to hard code it for now. We'll change this later. Then we want to create new cart item. And now we can set out the properties of our cart item. Now we've got an error here. Our shop controller doesn't know what a cart item is. So we will need to make a reference to the model's namespace. We want to use one of the models. We'll need to add a reference. And now we can define our properties. So our book ID is equal to our book ID parameter. It's up here. Our quantity is equal to our quantity parameter, also that comes from the method header. Our price is equal to the price that we queried here. For now, we'll just hard code the customer ID. And the date added will be equal to date time now. So the first two values come from the form, our little add to cart form. The third value we're looking up in the books table. Then the customer ID and date, we're just kind of generating those programmatically. We're going to save the item to the database. We'll use our cart items DB set. So we'll add the new object. And we'll call save changes. So this should add this book with the selected book with the selected quantity, should add it to the database. For right now, we're just going to assign the customer as random. We're going to get this to save, and then we'll come back and we'll have to write an algorithm here to figure out the customer ID. And lastly, we will return a redirect to an action that we'll create called cart. Now, this doesn't exist yet, but that's okay. We want to make sure add to cart is working first. We'll build the cart page afterwards. So this should give me an opportunity to try it out, and I can try putting some items in my cart, and then I can look in the database and see what's there. Move this around. Try to keep both the code and I'm going to go to shop. And I want to buy 1 copy of The Fifth Risk. Okay. Takes me to add to cart. So that's, okay, it didn't redirect. So we'll see what's going on. Did this work? I don't know. Well, let's go and look at we'll look in our database and see what happened. We may have to run this with our debugger to see what's happening. I'm just going to connect quickly to the database. I'll go take a look at my cart items table. We'll see what's going on. Just going to open up Management Studio and get connected. I'm not using the Azure database anymore. I don't really need it. It's going to be faster for me to work locally. So let me select my cart items. We'll see if there's anything here. Okay. Nothing here. Okay. I didn't get an error. I'll use my debugger. I'm going to put a breakpoint here, puts it on line 50. I'm going to start debugging. I'll try the process again and we'll figure out where this went wrong. Oops, I want to start debugging. I think we're close. I'll try and add the same book. So I'll click Add to Cart. Let's see what happens. Okay, it never actually calls, never gets here. So our method is never actually getting invoked. Why? I'm going to try it from my book details. I don't expect it's going to work there either. So our method is post. Our form's got book ID and quantity. I'm maybe just going to take this line out for a moment. See if my restart. Yes. So I'll deal with the anti-forgery token later. There's probably something I'll need to do in the form to enable it. Now it should work. My book ID is 1004. My quantity is 1. My price is $19.99. My customer ID is hard-coded. Date time now, 2:30, 46 seconds. I'll just continue. Right now I get taken off to cart. That's what we wanted. And now I can see that this item got added. Okay, I'll deal with the anti-forgery token later. I mean, there's something I'll have to put in my form to ensure. Okay. Take my breakpoint out. Start my server again. So now if I add another item to the cart, so I add 2 of the book Speak No Evil. So now I've got 1 item of book 1004, 2 items for book 1005, but we just hard-coded. So this is obviously not a permanent solution. So we're going to need a better way of dealing with the identifying who this customer is, because they might not be logged in, they might not even have an account. So we're going to need to write a method, use the session object to manage this. So we want to identify customer for each shopping cart. So we're going to use the session variable for this. Is customer ID session variable already set? So we're going to check our session this way using the HTTP context object dot session we'll use, they've modified this, try get value. No, I don't think that's what we want. Sorry. That's not the method we want. Try keys. They've changed this a bit. Sorry. This has been updated. We'll check the docs for the latest. And .core. This is not what we want. Okay, let's do .NET Core 5. So items are for a single request, so that's not going to help us. Sorry, I won't spend too much time looking at this now. I may have to clean this part up. Next week, I'll do it on my own time. My apologies. So we've enabled session support. So this is new, the temp data provider. If we use temp data. Okay, we will come back to this. I'll clean this up on my own time. Microsoft's changed this a good deal in the last little bit. I apologize, my fault for not going over all of this. Let's see. Yeah, they don't have, used to have get set string and get string methods, which would be simple, but those are not supported anymore. They've only got get type. Yeah, that's just our session ID. We can call set, but it's also in a byte value. Okay. I'm just going to comment that out for now. Just for today, that's fine. We'll hard code our customer ID. We'll clean that part up next week. So we'll just move on for now to the cart page. So we want to get the user's cart. But once they add it, but we want to do more with what is available, because we'll also need to read it if the value exists. A good suggestion, Megan, is available would help us, but we need to be able to actually read an individual value, an individual session variable. So after we add something to the cart, we want to show a cart page that displays, we want to show a page like this. Show the current items in the cart with the option to continue. So just for now, we won't filter. We'll just get everything in the cart items table. We'll have to add the filter once I fix up the session variable. So we'll just get a list. We will return a view. And we'll pass that view a list of items in the cart. We'll also want in here to include the parent, book. So in order to do this, this is what I needed in the other. I forgot, we need to make a reference to Entity Framework Core. So get the cart items, but we also want to join it to the parent object, which is the book. So we can show things like the book title and book image for each item in the cart. So add the reference that gets suggested, the reference to Entity Framework Core. That allows us to make this join. And then we can scaffold a cart view. Excuse me. We can then also implement remove from cart. So I'll right-click my method. We're going to add a view. We're going to pick a razor view because, again, we'll let Visual Studio scaffold this. It's mostly going to be a table. And then we can customize that table. We're going to add a razor view. The view name is cart. The template is list, because this page is going to list a series of cart items. Our model class will be cart item. And our data context, it'll default to application DB context. We'll leave these two items checked. So I'll leave my screen up for a minute. You can see the 4 options we want to pick. View name is cart, template is list, model class is cart item, data context, same as usual. It wouldn't create it as a full page. It would be a component that we would then have to embed into another page, like the login partial. This component here is a partial view that's embedded into the layout, but it only contains this section. So if you wanted like a cart sort of pop-up window, like Indigo has, let me go back. Like we could create a cart partial that we would then display. But I'm going to create the whole cart page. So I'm going to click Add. So it scaffolds out a page with an HTML table. So what does this actually look like? Well, let me add some items to the cart. Add one of these. It says my view wasn't found, so I need to build my solution. And now it gives me something like this. Obviously, we need to make some changes here. It's a start. What changes should we make to this page? Probably quite a few. How would you polish this up? Okay, so we probably want to change this. We might want to change it so it's sorted by title. Okay. So we could do that. Include the order by. So order by the book title. Okay, so if you add that order by clause, yeah, in fact, the book title's not even showing up, is it? In what got scaffolded. Doesn't even show us the book title. So we're going to put that first, but it's actually not even here. These are the authors. So if we go to our cart, I'll just hard code that in as title. And then inside our loop, yeah, we need at item.title. Sorry, item.book.title. So it's the parent object, right? Because it just scaffolds the columns from cart items. Cart items only has the book ID. The title is in the parent book object. So we're going to make that first. Okay, so now we get the book titles. What else should we do here? There's a number of things we need to do to polish this. I think there's some stuff we should remove. There's probably some stuff we should add. We could remove the details, although we may want to make the book title still links to the details, right? Here on Indigo, I can go back before I check out. Okay, I want to see this again. So I'm going to remove the details link. Actually, I think what I'll do, I'm going to move that link and wrap it around the book title. I'll get rid of the word details. I'm going to put it in my very first column. And I'm just going to change this from cart item ID to book ID. And ASP controller is going to be equal to books. So now if I click the book title, I can go and see the details on that product. Okay, so I can click. And now my magic little JavaScript link, it takes me back. We should do some other things here. The date added in customer ID, we don't need those things. This column says book. It should say author. Our price should be formatted. This create new link doesn't make any sense. So we should remove that. We should format this as currency. Maybe also show the thumbnail of the books. And maybe we'll move the author over here. So we'll maybe start at the top and work our way down. We can get rid of the create new. We'll add some more effect. So our tables got table stripe and table hover. We'll get our nice alternating background rows. I'm going to get rid of the date added and customer ID. We don't need to see those things. So we can get rid of those. I'm also going to make my second column just say author as the title. And then I'm going to get rid of this one that says model.book. So I've got 4 columns: title, author, price, quantity. After title, I'll just put in actually an empty heading. And I can stick the image to the right of the book title. Down inside my loop, after the title, so if our book.image isn't null, let's display it. And if the book image is null, we'll show the placeholder. Just copy this whole thing for our placeholder. So we've got our title, our image, and then third column should be our book author. Item.book.author. And then I can delete these last 3 columns after quantity. Don't need them. So the title is first, that's a link. Then we've got our book image or our placeholder in the second column, the book author third, lastly, item and price. I also want to format the price, just like on our shop by category page, I want to format it as currency. So I use string.format, so my prices show as currency. Just see how this looks. So now we get the price, the author, our thumbnails as well. So not complete, but better. Closer to, say, what Indigo's cart looks like. Okay, there are some more things we need to do here. We'll have to deal with removing from cart. We'll also have to deal with this scenario. So let's say I do this. What happens if I add an item into the cart that's already here? Instead of putting it in separately, we should just be updating the quantity on this cart item rather than adding the same product into the same cart multiple times. We also want to show a total for the cart with checkout and keep shopping buttons. So I will push what we've done so far up to GitHub. Let's take a break. We'll keep working. We'll move into that functionality in the last part of class. Okay, let's take a pause here. I'm going to upload to Git now. May depend what you have here. I have price as a float. So it may depend what your data type is. You could change it if it's not a float.